Hello, and welcome to today's event on the promise of AI and K-12 education in the United States. My name is Jillian Diebold, and I'm a policy analyst at the Center for Data Innovation. The Center for Data Innovation is a nonprofit, nonpartisan think tank focusing on the intersection of data, technology, and public policy. Today, we're going to discuss AI and education and the ways it can improve schools and support students, teachers, and administrators. As the school year comes to a close, many of the challenges facing schools that were exacerbated by the pandemic remain. Artificial intelligence provides one path to addressing these issues. If you haven't already seen, we recently released a report on this subject last month, available on our website, datainnovation.org. In this report, we get into the opportunities brought by AI in schools, such as increasing student engagement and helping educators design better interventions. But we also identify the very real challenges that come with innovation in the classroom. The goal of today's discussion is to talk about how AI can boost the quality of K-12 education across the board and how policymakers can address the concerns that come with the technology so as to ensure the effective and equitable deployment of AI in the classroom. This is meant to be an open discussion, so for those watching online, you can submit and vote on questions using Slido. If you're watching on our website, you can find the link below the video. And if you're on one of the other streaming platforms, you can find the link in the video description. We have a great lineup of panelists today. We have Jeremy Rochelle, Executive Director of Learning Sciences Research at Digital Promise. We have Michelle Zhou, co-founder and CEO of Juji. We have Linda Martin, the Director of Learning Strategy for Strategic Solutions at McGraw-Hill. And we have Sharad Sundararajan, CEO of Merlin Mind. So thanks to all of you for being here today. And Linda, I was hoping you could start us off and talk a little bit about what personalized learning is and maybe how it provides value to both students and educators.
Hi, thanks, Jillian. And thank you so much for inviting me to this panel discussion today. I'm super excited to be talking about AI and education. Personalized learning is, I think a lot of times when people think about personalized learning, they think about something digital, but it's actually not just something that is provided by something digital. It's actually a path in education. It's taking into account students' strengths, their interests, whatever it is that we can do to give them a unique learning path based off of all of those things that make them a unique learner. So personalized learning, we're trying to adjust the instruction for the student to produce the most optimal outcomes.
Great. So I think that it would be helpful maybe for our audience to sort of talk about some of the use cases, maybe specifically for students. So Michelle, your company focuses on chatbots, and I'm curious about how you think these and other AI-powered tools are sort of changing the classroom experience.
So Linda already kind of mentioned, right? So because every student really has his or her own learning style and strengths and weaknesses. So in this case, it is if the world is perfect, which means it is you can hire a teacher or you can hire an instructor for every single student in the school. But however, that's not very feasible. So what the AI's role in here is, it's really scale out the scarce resources from the teaching side. So you can actually, using the AI, like in our case, it's a conversational agent, to better understand each student's learning style, maybe needs and wants, as well as their learning motivations. And then by personalize the learning path, I'm using Linda's word, to each student. So which means you can really deliver this personalized learning at scale. So that's basically the role of the AI.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, sort of about scaling out these limited resources. And I think oftentimes we're talking about, teachers having to make limited resources work for a big class or in a low resource school district. So Sharad, I'm kind of interested in hearing from you about the relationship between AI enabled technology and teachers. How would you say what that relationship should be? How can it empower them? How does it work with teachers and AI?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jillian. And a quick correction, the CEO is not here. I'm heading the software engineering, but I am one of the founders. So thanks for that question. I think teachers have struggled with a lot of workload, especially during the pandemic. It's been exacerbated, but they've everything from classroom management, lesson planning, grading, name it, administrative tasks, and it hasn't really let up. There's tech frustration in the class with more tech coming in, and the relationship here is we need them as co-creators. We have kind of a complementary relationship where we need to involve educators very early on in any kind of design, any kind of development, which we've tried to do ourselves in Merlin Mind from the beginning. And we need to view them as co-thought leaders over here, so we could kind of choreograph this journey and the products we develop, AI in particular. We want them to be involved right from the beginning, so there is this continuous dialogue about what is okay and what isn't, what the trade-offs of value and risk are. If I may, I think Merlin Mind, the team's been trying to conceptualize that experience. How should that look for teachers? What does AI entering the classroom look like? And our solution is essentially, it's a multimodal digital assistant meant to help automate teacher workflows. So that can only happen if we can kind of co-create that, understand what their workflows are. We'll probably get into it later in the discussion, but short answer for you would be we co-create that solution together. And I do see them as joint thought leaders in this.
Jeremy, I'm curious in hearing your thoughts sort of on that same question about maybe what you perceive the relationship between AI and educators should be.
I think we need a really broad and rich conversation about what our goals are. What are we really trying to accomplish? I think AI is potentially powerful, and that opens possibilities, but it also makes us choose. And so I have to admit, I'm a little suspicious of individualized learning. And one reason I'm suspicious is, suppose what you decide is student A is behind and student needs to slow down and work more slowly because they're struggling. Student C is ahead, so we need to speed them up. Well, if you apply that on a massive scale, what you would obviously get is an increase in learning gaps. The kids that were behind would have learned less, and the kids that were ahead will have had chances to go further. And is that what we want? And so I think it brings up lots of ethical challenges and value-laden challenges about what we want. And so Digital Promise is a nonprofit. We don't have a particular product we're aiming for, but what we do really want is to create a really rich conversation that gets into the details of, was the last decade's version of personalized learning, we just stick with that? Does that adequately describe what we're trying to achieve? Or do we need to get more precise about where we really want to go and who should be at the table? Thinking about that question of what our goals really are.
Could you expand a little bit about maybe what the last decade looked like and maybe where we're at right now, sort of the current state of play?
Yeah. One thing I've been doing is looking at the past national educational technology plans. There was one in 2010 and there was one in 2017. And I've been asking myself, what didn't they cover that we're now really facing? And so, one thing is some of the things that Sharad was bringing up. Most of the previous national ed tech plans had a lot of visions for teachers, and the idea was basically if we gave teachers some professional development, they'd be able to do more. And what we find is teachers are being asked to do too much, and their job is untenable. And so Sharad's talking about what can we do to make their jobs better? And that's really a different conversation. We haven't had a conversation, a big enough one, about how technology could really lead to a more satisfying and effective job for teachers. So I think that's really different. I think if you look back at old plans, I'll just pick one more because I don't want to go on too long. What they talk about is security and privacy. as the main issues that are issues with data. And bias wasn't on the horizon in either 2010 or 2017. And now we really have to think hard. And there are actually congressional hearings going on about bias in educational technology products. The White House Office of Science Technology Policy is considering an AI Bill of Rights. And so we have issues that are super pressing and hot now that when we look back even 5 years, they weren't even on the table. And so I see like AI is forcing a turn in our discourse, and there's new things we have to talk about. And what I really hope, and what Digital Promises hope, is we can bring people into that turn and really get them talking about these new issues that seem so important.
I think that's a really interesting point about that sort of shift even from the last 5 years, especially saying that, it was almost an overguidance or sort of asking teachers to do too much, like you said. And Sherrod or anyone who really wants to answer this, I guess I'm curious though, do you still think the discourse should revolve around that sort of training for educators, or do we need to move beyond that and think about it differently? Really, anyone who wants to answer that can.
May I say something about it?
Yeah.
Because you asked a great question about when the technology advances, right? So how that will change the relationship also between the teachers, the educators, and the technology as well. Because actually, not just long ago, I wrote an article about this. So going back to Jeremy's point, I think there are definitely more questions we need to answer, we need to discuss. But we also know that one size fits all definitely doesn't work, because one size fits all will put the students who are at a disadvantage and more at a disadvantage, because the school education will go as a business as usual. But for the students who learn very well, it doesn't fit them either, right? So we knew that one size fits all doesn't work, even though we don't know what exactly individualized learning might be, how it will work. But another issue I want to bring up in this discussion is this, because right now, I don't know whether it's a public knowledge, whether it's a common knowledge for the educators yet. Is this development of the advanced technology? Now we're trying to make them available for the masses. So which means is the teachers, the educators in the past, they couldn't use those AI technology. Now they can, because of a no code, because of the reusable AI or reusable technologies. So in that kind of situation, so what teachers can do more, and who these are policymakers, or maybe maybe Jeremy's company organization. So who will bring the awareness of this technology to the teachers, to the educators? We're asking the questions all the time. So how the teachers are being even aware of this one? So let's say, so basically I'm thinking about this one. It is, it's right. We ask teachers to do a lot, right? But depending on what we ask them to do, using what tools. So I have a very kind of maybe it's not this is analogy. So let's say in the past 100 years ago, when we don't have any tools like a tractor, like all those machines, you ask people to move mountains. Of course, it's a lot of work, and people barely can do that, right? But now you have those machinery. But if we don't educate people, we don't tell people those are machines you can use, are better tools you can use. If they're still sticking to the old habits and old ways of doing things, and actually that's how we can bring the awareness, a level of awareness to the people because of technology advances. So actually now probably they can do less, but for more results, for more outcomes. So then in this case, it is at least from our company's point of view, we really want to position the teachers, the educators as the supervisors of the AI tools versus as operators. So the big difference it is the human as machine operators means the humans have to do everything. You have to turn every knob and set every settings. But when humans become the supervisors of something, which means you tell the tools to do A, B, C, and you might basically relieve this person to do from a mundane work, routine work. So that's the kind of messages we wanted to or send it to the educational industry, the world, right? So I'm wondering, I'm here to learn as well. I'm wondering because I heard Jeremy's organization, I heard and Sharad, because Linda, of course, McGraw-Hill is a very big company and focusing on education. I'm just wondering who is in this area and actually it's interested in bring this next generation of the technologies to educate the educators. I would love to hear more discussions on that front.
I just wanted to plus one everything you said, Michelle. I think that's exactly right. I think the way PD programs, professional development programs, are looking is probably beginning to change. But so that is definitely one instrument we should continue to use. But we are going through that ourselves. We have training sessions, train the trainer, or with the educator, and I think the answer isn't any one of them. I think there is peer-to-peer learning that we're finding to be effective, where teachers evangelize or teach other teachers because they speak a different language almost. There's easier flow of information, so we need to encourage more opportunities for that. We are also looking to see how can we use our own technology to improve the education aspect of it. Obviously, our goal, our hypothesis is let's untether the teacher from the front of the room and offload a lot of the tasks, automate the workflow. The workflow for us starts from something as simple as a shortcut using voice to say, hey, switch my laptop so they don't have to go to the front, to open that file on Oceans inside Google Drive. If today we were to outline those steps, that's like 10 steps over there. You got to open, log in, go search, do that. You just bypassed all that with one. But that requires us understanding the workflow. That's just the beginning. There are several different workflows we need to capture. But your point on how do they know this is what you can do, and I think that there is a little bit of learning curve over there, but we're trying to reduce that. We're trying to understand how we could communicate this better, even through the tech, even through the help, the discovery, the education through this. So I would say it's multi-pronged: teacher, peer-to-peer, PD programs, as well as through tech and the user experience. I think that is so critical. I know, Michelle, that's your back. You're coming from the HCI world, and it's been there for 5-6 decades. That is so critical to how we interface with this, with the tech. So that's just from our experience. I just want to add one comment to, I think, Jillian, a point you made earlier about and Jeremy, about bias and privacy. I think it's critical for us to lead with transparency, and I think a lot of the policies are going there as well. GDPR, for instance, a lot of these policies are basically saying, what are you using it for? The only thing I would say is we shouldn't be married to policies from 3-4 decades back. I think we do need to revisit them. Jeremy, you kind of brought this point up on conversation. I think we need to have that continuous conversation, revisit and say, what's the value, what's the trade-off? So,
yeah, that's a great conversation, and I'd love to follow up on Michelle's point, because you asked in part, Michelle, like, who's going to help inform, who's going to help educate the educators, and I just want to raise my hand and say Digital Promise is taking on some of that. And I want to use that to actually bring a point into the conversation. We haven't yet defined AI in this conversation, and one of the things that we're informing educators about is that you have a choice of definitions. One commonplace definition is human-like intelligence that's a separate agency. That raises a set of questions. How does that relate to the teacher's agency and the student's agency? How human-like is it? We find it a pretty deceptive definition. Another definition is intelligence augmentation, taking the AI and flipping the letters. When you say intelligence augmentation, you think about things like, this is really an automation capability based on observed associations. That associations right away tells you there's bias in there, and automation tells you this is going to be best at things that are automatable. It's not really human-like, it's automation. Then we can have a conversation with teachers about what kind of automations would be helpful to you. I think that's exactly what you're doing, Sharad. What kind of automations do teachers want? That's what you were describing. Anyway, we're taking some responsibility. I hope others will too. We've helped the U.S. Department of Ed, Office of Educational Technology with some blogs. And so you can go to the OET website, and there's one on definitions of AI, for example. And so that's a great starting resource for people who might be listening in on this and wondering, what is AI anyway? What are they talking about? Well, we're trying to put out some possible definitions and just making it clear that we don't have to accept a definition that's magical and it actually isn't real, that we can choose definitions that are precise and show us the limits, not just the possibilities.
Just going back to what Sharad said, I think one of the points he mentioned is great. And then I will let Linda to chime in, because Linda herself is educator, and then he can give you her definition about AI as well. So what Sharad said it's about transparency, right? So like you said, I remember I'm a big fan of Harry Potter. And I think in the second episode, they already said do not trust anything if it's a magic, but you can't explain it. Remember, right? I was in this a very weird book, and then you trust it, and you don't know what magic is behind it, and they normally does more harm than help, right? So just going back to what you said, normally in our definition of the AI, it's always about machines or piece of software has some human capabilities, a scale, we call the scales, right? But really to help humans to do more, to do better. So that's kind of from our point of view, it's a very simple definition about, it's a combination what you said, Jeremy, right? So has some human skills, for example, when I talk human skills, is calculating skills, but it can do more than humans. But it's doing something humans do not want to do. So I keep writing all this one because people keep asking our questions. It is, what is AI in your definition? So I'm going to lead this one maybe to Linda. Maybe you can share your definition of AI, because you are in the educational world. Actually, she is actually teaching students and tutoring students.
So my background is in education. I'm a former math teacher. I've been with McGraw-Hill for many years now. And we are always looking at technology as a tool. It is something that we hope that can always assist a teacher, make their life easier, make it easier for the students to learn. And so I am very curious, and we're currently conducting research to look into the potential of AI and see what it can do. And like you said, what its limitations might be, and see if there's a there for its use in educational products. So what I am particularly interested in is, when we think about the crisis that we have right now with students being so far behind, a lot of what we're hearing is the solution for that is tutoring, one-on-one tutoring. We know that is the most effective solution for help bringing kids up to speed, right? And would that we could provide a tutor for every single student? Would that schools could afford to provide tutors for every single student? We know that would be the most effective thing. But knowing that is not feasible for a lot of schools, and especially schools where we have our most underserved students, is there a potential for AI to help out in this situation? And never would I, again, having been a former teacher, the teacher is the person who is the best equipped to teach the content to the students. And in a classroom setting where everybody is collaborating, that is the most enriching experience for the student. But where I always struggled with the students was when at the end of the lesson, we're ready to take practice, they're going to send them home, but we usually have a little time at the end of the class period. And 10 hands fly out. I'm one person, and I'm trying to get to all of those students and help them. And there's some students that never raise their hand, right? And they will never raise their hand. And yet they need my help just as much as the student who is the squeaky wheel that is always getting the grease. So how might AI help with that? How might the AI be an assistant to the teacher to not only help out those students with questions that the teacher knows? The teacher has a wealth of information in her brain about what are those misconceptions that the students might have, things that come up year after year when they teach this particular lesson. Maybe there's a way that AI could help to answer those questions, right? And also point out to the teacher things that spots in students' misconceptions or particular groups of students that these students need your specific one-on-one support. And this is exactly what they need help with. I don't know that AI can solve all of that, but I'm intrigued by the possibility and really eager to try to figure it out.
That's all of these points are very insightful. I'm sort of curious, Linda, you brought up about, how AI can really help in sort of more underserved students, underserved districts. But I'm sort of wondering about the deployment of that. If we do it across the board, what if AI is already in some schools that are in richer districts? How do we sort of ensure that we're sort of balancing this and we're really reaching those students in districts who really need these tools versus, simply giving it to every single person. And, we might see those gaps sort of between the schools continue or even worsen. Anyone who really wants to jump in on that can, but maybe Jeremy could start us off.
Sure, be happy to think with you about that. One of the things Digital Promise does a lot of is we work with big networks of schools. We have the Verizon Innovative Learning Schools, which are exclusively low-income schools that are getting technology and connectivity, and then a lot of ed tech coaching. And so I think we have to be careful about give them it as the model for what we're trying to do, and careful about deployment as the word. Schools have leaders, and the leaders have goals, and we're trying to help them achieve their goals, and they need a voice in what they bring into their schools and how it fits their situations. And so sometimes the history of ed tech being deployed at scale is not great. We see very big differentials in who gets really enriching stuff, they're the richer schools, and who gets a lot of drill and practice and low-end stuff. And we have to look at that history, and we have to be thoughtful about it, and we have to realize that deployment is a window into the problem we have to address. But our history that we've gotten to by looking at this issue as deployment hasn't gotten us, the solution isn't within that word. We need to think differently about how we engage and work with low-income schools to help them meet their goals, and where they build capacity in their leaders and they're in charge. So anyway, that's sort of how I start thinking about the question. I'd love to hear what my colleagues on the call think about.
I can go next if that's okay. I think there are a couple of different dimensions to this. One is if we view this as a digital divide problem, then you have network connectivity and you have access to devices, and you have to go after that. And there are some ideas there we could get into. Deployment itself, I think, and Linda, to your point, to your question on AI, I think there are a range of AI solutions being deployed, from software to hardware, from predictive analytics, for at-risk students or dropout, data that leads to dropout prevention programs, and things like Turnitin for academic integrity, to consumer-facing tech that's kind of entered, like Google Productivity Suite that's evolved to Google Classroom or the Alexas. Now, in our case, I can tell you the experience we've kind of going through ourselves right now. We're a customized solution. We're building for the classroom. We're not a consumer space coming in, and a lot of bespoke environments. We go in and we see that there's infrastructure play which is different. Network configurations are different. The displays are different. You have like flat screen TV. You have interactive whiteboards ranging from 5 to 12, 15 years old. So you have to contend with that, and we have to support that. So support becomes critical. Training in PD, again, a big part of it. In our case, classroom dynamics, something when you look at deployment, we've conceptualized, designed, prototyped, tested, and then you start playing with it to see if there's high fidelity of implementation in the classroom. And you start, for instance, in our case, the reason I keep saying multimodal, and it's not, even though voice is there, it's multimodality is so critical to us because we go into that environment and we find that it's a harsh acoustic environment. You have noise from the kids, you have HVACs, you have a teacher who says, I don't want to yell across the room. So we have like near field in our remote control. We have an air mouse, we have keypad, there's touch. You need a graceful fallback as you discover what that environment is. Now, if you were to do it the other way, where you develop for a different vertical and just try to shove it down this, it's not going to work. So that's one of the things we're discovering is you need to kind of, that's why I said co-creators. We need to work with educators to say, okay, what makes sense from an experience, from a technology. All of these aspects need to come together before we discuss scale. And the good news is, I think the appetite's there. Teachers are beginning. There are some forward-looking schools and teachers who are willing to say, I'd like to work with you guys, and this is revolutionary. So we do need to partner more on that front. But in terms of low resource, I think I would say from a policy point of view, there are some interesting efforts like Meta Mesh or NYC Mesh, which is like Wi-Fi for the people from an innovation point of view, where I think policy can take inspiration from what they're doing over there. So I do think there are gaps there. We could, for devices, maybe explore a marketplace where we can move from devices between schools or other environments. It's going to be hard to have a very sophisticated AI and go into a place where there's no network. And we have seen some schools where we don't have even Wi-Fi, and we're like, oh, wait a minute, the product needs it. So I think we need to do both in parallel. I wouldn't say let's play the waiting game. I think you need innovation on both to proceed in parallel.
Just to add to what Sharat said, he mentioning a word called the digital divide, right? So I have been actually advocating and championing is to remove and bridge, if you will, AI divide. So just like what Linda mentioned, even though we don't know yet if AI can really do all the help that a teacher would want, but even just part of the help if the AI can provide, and AI is non-trivial, right? Takes lots of resources. So Sharat gave an example about infrastructure requirements, network requirements. But when you go to the AI, when you're talking about adopting and developing AI, traditionally, that's we're talking about the billion-dollar companies can afford that. Billion-dollar company can afford that human talents, the infrastructures, the resources. So then what I'm concerned with it is because AI gradually now has been showing its value, but if we don't democratize in it, but if we don't actually help everyone in the masses to be able to use it, adapt it, that will create a huge AI divide, probably much wider than the digital divide we're talking about right now, which means we'll put the people, really many of them, at disadvantages, right? So that's one we have been working on. It is how can we democratize that? And of course, one type of it is to help in the education side. Another part of it is really democratizing the use of technologies. Just thinking about maybe 30 years, 40 years ago, not everybody can afford to buy even a computer, right? Because IBM computer takes millions of dollars and big places to run it, and many $1 million to run it. But now everybody has a personal computer. Your phone is your personal computer. So in the future, as we see, maybe in the very near future, in the 2 or 3 years down the road, we want to be able to democratize in the use of AI. So which means it is teachers, schools, doesn't matter, and how rich they are, how much resource they are, to be able to hopefully master and use AI to help in their daily routines and businesses. So this is basically adding to what Sharat said. It is in terms of helping to bridge the gap of digital divide. And next one will be AI divide.
I think that's a really interesting point. Something else I was hoping to get into would be sort of about the data sets that these AI tools are kind of built on. I think one big challenge or concern is sort of about the representation with these data sets, or sort of ensuring these tools are built on these representative data sets. So, for example, to avoid a situation where a predictive tool might be built on incomplete data, where so some groups might not have longitudinal data about them due to various historical reasons, and sort of ensuring that students aren't assigned to different achievement tracks sort of based on that incomplete data. So I'm sort of curious how we should handle that situation, how we can kind of achieve or ensure that these things are built sort of correctly or adequately. And I'm curious about where we might need more data, what groups, what places, things like that. I don't know who would be best to handle this. Maybe Sharon, if you could start.
Yeah, sure. And I could actually start with an example that we were looking at, right? Several, 4 or 5 years back when we originally started this, we looked to see what was readily available. And you go out there and you see, for voice, for instance, you see North American male voice data is readily available, and we're like, doesn't quite fit the demographic, and it's so diverse, the schools over here. And it's recorded. Like, the original thing was like what you can see freely available is like recordings from LibriVox, if those of you who've used those recordings that have been converted and in a controlled environment. And now you're saying, well, there's echo, there's noise, there's it's harsher environments. So now how do we get that data set, and how do we do it by balancing the privacy? Which is why I said what I said. I think we need to continuously evaluate the value versus risk at all points in time. So we collected in different environments. You have to, again, the solution here isn't just single fold. We need help where there's a partnership for data sharing from the government to companies who are collecting it at scale, to simulation. In some very small cases, synthetic data can also be helpful, where you simulate it, have transformations, and you augment the data, but I wouldn't say it's always applicable. So I would say this requires some algorithmic work, partnerships between companies. Digital Promise has been fantastic to work with. We worked with them in the past. And actually have government efforts over here. We could definitely use a partnership to say what does it mean. Yeah.
Jeremy, do you want to add anything to that?
There's a whole set of really challenging problems in here. One is that we would want, there's a lot of diversity in the United States. We would want it represented in data sets. We have the example of the movie Coded Bias, which starts very memorably with the woman, Black woman, whose face is not recognized until she puts on a white mask. We can't have that, obviously. But also, it's not just that we need people who are represented to have their data point in the set, but the problem of bias is more insidious than that, because the data set may encode. Remember, we're dealing with automation based on associations. The associations may be based on existing historical inequities that are revealing themselves in that data. And there's a big danger that if what we take as truth, even if it has all people in it, is capturing those historical inequities, our automation would repeat them and make them worse and make them larger scale. So this representativeness has two dimensions. It's both who's in there, but what patterns are we talking about capturing when we form those associations? I think the best way to cut through this is to work with schools and districts and ask them, what problems are you trying to solve? And what data we need to solve your problem? And really to be researcher practitioner partnerships, be problem focused, and not think about data in the abstract, because I find these problems intractable, but instead to be very problem focused and be solving the right problems and gathering the data we need to solve that problem for that set of constituents. And then I think they become a little bit easier. So I guess that's the direction I'd pursue. Like, who's at the table when we decide what is the data we're going to use, and what do they want that data to be used for?
I think that makes a lot of sense. Maybe right before we do some audience questions, I'd probably like to return to the idea of oversight, because I think that's kind of a theme that we've been talking about a lot. And so, we're getting into the data and what schools actually need. I'm wondering how schools should really make these or manage these oversight decisions, especially if they are operating on incomplete data. They might not know what their issues are or where they're missing things or what patterns they're built on, and how should we help them deal with that, manage that, all of those things. I'm curious about not just teacher oversight now, but maybe more just the school districts or the administrators, how they should make those decisions. Linda, maybe if you'd like to, or Michelle.
Well, my thoughts with that go towards, when you first implement anything that's using AI, I think there has to be validation of, what is it saying? What is the AI telling you? And then can you validate that with your own eyes, with your own understanding of what you're seeing? So I think about whenever we get reports in from different personalized learning solutions that various companies offer, and they make recommendations about students, what they're good at, what they should be working on next. And teachers know their students, and that is just some input of information to let them make a decision about where to go next. There should really be, in my mind, anything that's saying automatically, because of this information that the AI has taken in and computed, that this is the outcome that should happen. Nothing should be automated such that automatically happens. There should be involvement of a human in there to look at that. As you have humans doing that more and more, they can start to work with those systems and improve them. And again, look for that bias and start to make improvements in the system. But I do think there should always be a human touch in there. We have systems here that make recommendations, but we really hesitate a lot to automate things like that, because it really just can cause problems.
Thanks. Any other reactions?
I just want to add that if we want to task teachers with that oversight, that's going to be more workload. So I think we do need to keep that in mind, that reducing their workload so that they could do this is important. And I agree with Linda on how important it is for them to be to have a human in the loop, even with the latest cutting AI technology. Like, we have these large language models, they're generating content for us. You need the teacher there to kind of course correct, choreograph that experience to help author. And that is the feedback we're getting. Teachers are basically saying, give me more control of how to actually take this forward, how to author this experience. They not just lesson planning, but actually planning the experience for the classroom management. Just wanted to add.
That is not to say that we can't make it easier for them to take that recommendation, right?
Yeah.
It's just a matter of, we shouldn't take that away from them, their ability to say, oh no, I know that student.
100%.
That student was just having a bad day.
Yeah.
They're actually fine where they are. They can do this. I'm going to ignore that. That should be their choice.
Yeah. And we are nowhere near replacing the teacher. I wouldn't even consider that, because I think just the state of AI, there is so many things, Linda, as you said, in terms of the emotional, the social, the behavioral aspects that you just cannot capture in any ITS or intelligent tutoring system out there. It's just impossible. I agree.
Yeah, and just in terms of the question about how schools should make decisions about these technologies, first of all, I want to acknowledge where we are. Like, we've taught EdTech leaders, they've learned, they've become capable of dealing with things like data security and privacy. Cybersecurity and bullying have big issues. There's a whole new set of issues that this is bringing in. And so one thing I think we have to do as a starting point is look at when we're automating a decision, what's the scale of the consequence to the student or the teacher? What hangs on that decision? And be very, very careful and do a lot of interrogation if we're going to allow AI to make decisions that are very consequential and could change what course you get to take next, what college you go to. And there are some systems that are involved in test taking and proctoring and are marking kids as potentially disobedient or having behavioral issues. And so we have to be super careful about those sorts of things, because massive bias could come in and really hurt kids. So there's like a do no harm problem. And to figure out the do no harm, we have to look to the degree of consequences to the person to make some of these decisions. We have to be super careful because there's a tendency of humans, and it's in the book, Weapons of Math, not Mass, Weapons of Math Destruction. There's a tendency of people to defer to algorithms and think that algorithms are perfect and that they're better than people, and therefore say, oh, the algorithm's got to be right, it made the decision, but the algorithm isn't necessarily right. And so when we put an algorithm in charge of a decision that's highly consequential to the individual, we just got to be super careful. On the other hand, like when we're looking at this circumstance, I'll just take Sharad's product, for example. A teacher is asking for assistance to open a map on their display. Hey, if the thing got it wrong, the teacher will say, no, not that map, the other map. It wasn't a big deal. We got over it. So I think that's much safer place for us to be letting products in, because the stakes are so much lower. And when we're looking at automating very routine things, the teacher or the student just needs help with the routine. But it's already routine, what's being done. Well, consequences are low. So we need, the main point I'd make is that we have already learned from our own behavior with cell phones that individuals alone will make these decisions poorly. And so we need structures that help individuals make better decisions. We need guidance, we need policies, because this is too hard to leave to individuals to figure out what's safe and what's not safe.
Yeah, Jeremy, I think you mentioned a lot of the different concerns that come with AI and tech. But one more thing that I think the audience is asking about a little bit is about the privacy considerations here. Maybe you or anyone can explain some of the privacy preserving technologies that we're sort of seeing and what you think the potential is there with them, and just the other sort of considerations that, policymakers and industry need to be thinking about with educational AI. Anyone who wants to?
I can definitely comment and just a few words. I think there are privacy preserving technologies. I think everything from getting consent, you start there, school, educator, parent consent, to actual algorithmic work on how you anonymize, how you de-identify the data, again, when you say transparency, you need to call out exactly what it is being used for, and policies kind of ask that of a lot of the edtech products, all of them. And of course, Cynthia Dwork's work on differential privacy is also incredibly powerful. I think the underlying intuition there is like the outcome of any analysis is essentially equally likely, independent of whether any individual joins or refrains from joining that data set. So I think it's the idea there is you introduce some statistical or probabilistic noise and you make it hard. But because you know the distribution, you could get some value out of it. But techniques like that, they're good with large data sets. So if you have a lot of data set, then you can spread your distribution out and the data and get enough of anonymity. But for smaller data sets, there are techniques out there. It's awareness. I think all of us need to be intimately aware of this and have governance processes in place and be honest, lead with transparency. It's kind of my take. Yeah.
Thanks. I think the next question from the audience is, again, sort of about use cases. So someone asked, what is the low-hanging fruit for AI in education? And is it more adding AI to existing processes, or is it really re-engineering what we have for AI? Maybe Michelle, you can answer this one.
So like actually Linda said, there from our point of view, there are really a lot of low-hanging fruits for AI in education. Uh, uh, it, it's always great to start by adding AI to existing processes, right? So I'm just going to use one of Linda's example. So let's say you have like 50 kids in a class, right? But not everybody, maybe it's at the same level of understanding, let's say math class or even physics class. So if you have the AI tool at the side, the students actually can ask questions, to ask for clarification. And one thing I didn't get a chance to say is why people want to use AI. Of course, one thing we all agree on is to scale out humans' time and effort to make scarce resources more available. But another side I want to mention, many people actually either ignored or not aware, is that actually AI, it is gives people the certain types of convenience and desirability which other tools do not give, right? So for example, I remember when I was a student in a math class, maybe I just didn't understand one particular aspect of math that was being taught by it's being teaching by the teacher, but I afraid to ask a question. Like Linda said, I would not be one of the people raise my hands because I felt like, am I stupid? Am I not smart as other kids because I don't understand this, right? So that's we see it again and again called the social desirability biases. So in that case, it is AI can serve as a very nice tool. We call it, for example, learning companion. So you can ask AI questions you're not clear about. It's one thing. Another one, it's a physical convenience. So let's say you have the students who are working on their homework at 7 p.m. at night, or even sometimes 10 p.m. or maybe midnight at night. The teachers are not really available, right? And to answer questions. So where are they going to get help from? As Linda mentioned, privileged kids, maybe you can hire a personal tutor 24 to be available 24/7. But most of them, including us, we don't have that privilege, right? So that's one. So adding AI to the existing processes, I think it will be a huge help, even for teachers in this case, right? To help them to learn about students, to help them to learn more about their students. If a teacher, I remember my friend actually is a math teacher in the school. She teaches 5 classes in a same on the same day. So each class maybe has 20, 30 students. So she will be dealing with over 100 students a day. How much time she could have to understand every student? So can we use AI as the tool? Again, I'm very much 100% with Linda on this one. It is we always consider AI as a tool, and going back to maybe align with what Jeremy said, it is to help decision making, but not make the decision for you, right? Because humans should be the decision maker. So in that case, it is adding to the existing process, either for the teachers or for the students. I would say that's low hanging fruits, and because the technology is already there and the teachers can really probably manage that, almost like teachers hire their own TAs to help.
That makes sense. So I think we've been talking a lot about these tools kind of in an abstract, and I think the audience is curious about how AI might be used at different grade levels, maybe early education versus high school. Linda, could you give maybe some examples of how it might be used in different grades?
Oh, wow. I get to dream. Okay. I think, and I'm dreaming, right? This is all I'm doing right now. My dream would be that students at lower levels could ask questions. If you have a student that, and it really at any level, let's be serious about that. I mean, a lot of what we have with artificial intelligence is reading things, right? Things are presented in a format that students might have to read, but imagine if that didn't have to be. Imagine if students could ask questions and hear answers back to those questions, or be directed to materials, to visual things. So right now we're just dreaming. We don't know how possible all of this is, but isn't it exciting to think about that possibility that a student could ask that? Or if you're in middle school and you are struggling with something, that the AI, what if it could be more empathetic? What if it could encourage you. A lot of students, I tutor students a lot, and they're really, it's not so much that they are lacking the skills. There are those that are lacking some skills, but a lot of them are lacking just courage, right? They really struggle so much with just feeling so down about, I'm just bad at math. I'm bad at math, but needing some of that encouragement. And you know, there's certainly doubt in a lot of people's mind that a computer could do that. But what if it could point out that this student really has a bad self-image of themselves as a mathematician? They really just don't think that they're any good at math. That's important information for a teacher to know. So if they could have that conversation and share that information with the teacher, that's also very, very crucial. It's not that the AI has to take care of all of that, right? But if it can bring that to the attention of a human to really give that student that individualized attention that they need, I see that as a win.
Just just wanted to say, part of your dream, Linda, is almost coming true. Well, you know, at least from a communal device in the classroom with our solution, Q&A is something we're, you know, looking into precisely for the things, you know, you have a definition you want to be able to ask. You just in time, you know, when it makes sense. And we run into that use case. We're not cooking up a lot of this. We're kind of going there and saying, what is it? And so low-hanging fruit over there is, for the teacher's point of view, is definitely something as simple as, I don't want to go and deal with the tech. I don't want to be plugging an HDMI cable over here and there. I just want to be able to say, switch to my document camera, something we're looking at. But in terms of the emotional component, I think actually I'm very curious to hear Michelle, because I know you, you know, what you had with, you know, the chatbot or dialogue-based systems. Where are we now to solve that problem that Linda is talking about in terms of, you know, having that conversation? What is your point of view?
Thank you for asking that. Actually, we're already deploying that with educational institutes, right? For example, for not to the level what Linda explained yet in terms of encouragement yet, right? We're still working on that, and to basically to proving out in the real world. But for example, like universities are using our work to help prospective students to feel like to give them information that's sufficient for them to make a decision, right? So for example, when people go find a program online, they may be they may doubt themselves whether they can complete that. Maybe they are hesitating and how much the value of the program might be, or maybe they could actually finish the program. So right now, the AI is helping the recruitment of specialists, or you can call it as academic program advisors, to provide the additional amount of information to help students make decisions. So this is basically at the college level, right? So we haven't done a lot of work at the K-12, right? K-12. Yeah, we're in the process of doing that right now. Working with, both you and Jeremy said, a partnership, collaboration. If you can help us have more partnership, we love it. And the one thing I want to mention, which I didn't see the question yet, which is very relevant, is this. This is which I'm super, super happy. So we have seen quite a few school districts in the US, right? So I think they're at a grade level of maybe 8th grade or 9th grade. So the teachers are traditionally science teachers. So this is actually under quite a, I remember maybe 2 or 3 are in a school district underprivileged, right? So I don't know how they found our platform. They come into our platform. Actually, they use our platform to teach their students about science, about AI, which we think, because we give them almost free use and practice. So that's one I felt like very kind of proud of it is, wow, now you give the next generation a chance, opportunity to learn about the technologies, right? Because among the students, you never know, maybe many of them will become teachers once they graduate, right? So I think that's the one I also, it's going back to your, Sharad, your point about bridging the digital divide. we're talking about bridging the AI divide, actually starting from the K-12 education.
That's wonderful to hear. Thanks.
So that's one way. I just saw it from, actually, I asked the person who did that. I said, oh, actually, their science teacher in a school district, traditionally it's considered they're underprivileged, right? So it's I'm very proud they're using it, right? It's not just
Okay,
this
so
thing
I
about
cut it.
school, right? From a private
I have
school.
to cut in. I think we have just like 2 seconds left. So I'm going to ask a lightning round question to all our panelists. And that is maybe answer it in 1 or 2 sentences, even though it's a big one. As schools are considering the ways AI fits into their classrooms, what does success look like to you for AI in education? Linda, start us off.
It's outcomes, right? It's outcomes and progress. It's growth. So it is all about the outcomes.
Jeremy?
Digital Promise is all about conversations where we work with you, the audience, to decide that. We're going to host a set of listening sessions with the U.S. Department of Education. So please follow us, our website, to see the announcement of those listening sessions. We'd love to have you join us.
Michelle?
I would say, I would add to Linda's, it's about learning experience and learning outcomes. So adopting AI now to actually optimize that learning experiences for your students and boosting the learning outcomes.
And Sherrod?
Stress-free, or rather stressed sage on stage to a stress-free guide on the side. That's the future. We want the teachers to be stress-free. That is success. Engagement.
Agreed. So thank you, everyone. And thanks to everyone in the audience for joining us today. This is obviously a really important area, really rich area of discussion. And I want to thank all of our panelists for sharing their insights. And I look forward to continuing to engage with all of you on these issues. And please feel free to reach out with any questions or comments based on the panel today. Thanks.